I let my stepdaughter torment my daughter for years to keep the peace. She ripped apart her only memory of her dead mother and ruined her reputation at school. I chose the bully over my own child and she walked out of my life forever. My daughter left on a Sunday morning in April. She was 17. She packed one bag. She didn't take photos off the walls. She didn't take the quilt from her bed. She didn't take the jewelry box her grandmother gave her. She took clothes, her laptop, her phone charger, and a Ziploc bag with torn pieces of paper inside. The torn pieces were what was left of the last letter her mother ever wrote her. Her dead mother. The letter that my stepdaughter had ripped apart 4 days earlier while my daughter begged her to stop. The letter I could have saved. The letter I could have protected. The letter that doesn't exist anymore because I chose to keep the peace instead of keeping my daughter safe. She walked to the front door. I was standing in the hallway. She looked at me, and the thing I saw in her eyes wasn't anger. Anger I could have worked with. Anger fades. Anger negotiates. What I saw was nothing. Vacancy. The complete, total, permanent withdrawal of a child who has looked at her father and concluded that he is not worth staying for. She said, "I'm going to Grandma's." I said, "Mia, please, let's talk about this." She said, "There's nothing to talk about. You picked her. You've always picked her. I'm done being the one you sacrifice so your new family stays comfortable." She opened the door. She walked out. The door clicked shut. Not a slam. A click. The quietest, most devastating sound I've ever heard. That was 9 months ago. She hasn't come back. She doesn't answer my calls. She doesn't read my messages. My daughter erased me from her life with the same finality that my stepdaughter used to erase her mother's letter. And I deserved it. I deserve every second of this silence. Because I earned it. Year by year. Choice by choice. Cowardice by cowardice. My name is Grant. I'm 46. My daughter Mia is 17 now, 16 when the final incident happened. Her mother, my first wife, was named Catherine. Catherine died when Mia was 7. Ovarian cancer. Diagnosed late. Gone in 11 months. Mia watched her mother disappear. Not all at once. In pieces. The hair first, then the weight, then the energy, then the smile, then the voice, then everything. A 7-year-old watched the woman who was her entire world shrink and fade and vanish, and the last thing Catherine did before she died was write Mia a letter. 4 pages. Handwritten. In Catherine's handwriting, which was already shaky from the medication and the weakness but still recognizably hers. She wrote it in the hospital, 3 days before she passed. She gave it to me in a sealed envelope and said, "Give this to her when she's old enough to really understand it." I gave it to Mia on her 10th birthday. She read it in her room alone. She came out an hour later with swollen eyes and held the letter to her chest and said, "Daddy, she says she's proud of me." I held her. I cried. She cried. And that letter became the most important object in my daughter's life. More important than any possession. More important than any gift. It was the last piece of her mother that existed in the world. Catherine's handwriting. Catherine's words. Catherine's love, preserved on paper, held together by a girl who read it so many times the creases had gone soft. I remarried when Mia was 11. Her name is Sandra. Sandra has a daughter from a previous marriage named Tess. Tess is the same age as Mia. They were both 11 when Sandra and I got together. 12 when we married. The blended family. The fresh start. The second chance at happiness after grief. That's how I framed it. That's what I told myself. That's the story I sold to everyone, including my daughter, who didn't want a new mother and didn't want a new sister and told me so, quietly and clearly, the night I announced the engagement. She said, "Dad, I don't want someone to replace Mom." I said, "Nobody is replacing Mom. Sandra is adding to our family." Mia looked at me with an expression I should have studied more carefully but dismissed because it was easier to dismiss. She said, "Okay." The same hollow okay that every child uses when they know their opinion doesn't matter but they're too young to argue. Tess. I need to tell you about Tess. Tess is everything Mia is not. Loud where Mia is quiet. Social where Mia is solitary. Demanding where Mia is self-contained. Tess fills rooms. Tess controls conversations. Tess needs to be the center of every dynamic she enters, and when she isn't, she makes it known through behavior that her mother calls spirited and that I, if I had been honest with myself at any point in the last 5 years, would have called cruel. The cruelty started within the first year. Small things. The same small things that every blended family story begins with because cruelty always starts small enough to dismiss. Tess would use Mia's things without asking. She'd take clothes from Mia's closet and wear them to school and deny it. She'd eat the food Mia had saved for herself. She'd change the TV channel when Mia was watching something, and when Mia protested, Tess would say, I was here first, even when she wasn't. Sandra would intervene on Tess's behalf every time. Just share, Mia. Don't make a big deal out of it. Be the bigger person. Be the bigger person. The phrase that parents use when they want the victim to absorb the harm so the bully doesn't have to face consequences. I heard Sandra say it 100 times. And I said nothing. Because Sandra was my wife. Because the house was peaceful when Mia absorbed the blow. Because confronting Tess meant confronting Sandra, and confronting Sandra meant conflict, and conflict meant risking the new life I'd built on the ashes of the old one. I chose the new life. I chose it every time. And my daughter paid the tax for my comfort every single day. Mia retreated. That's the word. Retreated. She pulled back from the common spaces. She ate faster so she could leave the table before Tess started. She stayed in her room. She stopped asking to have friends over because the last time she did, Tess inserted herself into the hangout and made Mia's friends uncomfortable with comments that were just pointed enough to sting but just vague enough for Sandra to dismiss as Tess being Tess. Mia's world contracted. Her bedroom became her country. Her door became her border. And behind that door, on her nightstand, in a wooden box Catherine's mother had given her, was the letter. The only thing Tess couldn't touch. The only thing that was untouchable. Until it wasn't. The letter. Let me explain what that letter meant before I tell you what happened to it. Mia read it every night. Every single night. She told me this once, about a year after I gave it to her, in one of those rare moments where she let me pass the wall. She said, I read it before bed. It's like hearing Mom say goodnight, she said it simply. Without drama. Like she was stating a fact about gravity or weather. She read her dead mother's letter every night because it was the only way she could hear her mother's voice. The paper was soft from being unfolded and refolded hundreds of times. The ink had faded in some places. But it was legible. It was real. It was Catherine's hand pressed against paper, forming words for a daughter she knew she was leaving behind. I am so proud of the person you're becoming. When you're scared, remember that I'm with you, even when you can't see me. You are the best thing I ever did. These are the phrases Mia told me about once, years ago, sitting on my lap, tracing the letters with her finger. I can't reproduce the full letter because it was destroyed. I only know the fragments my daughter shared with me before she stopped sharing anything at all. The incident happened on a Wednesday. Mia was at school. She'd left for class that morning and her room was locked, the way it always was. She'd started locking it the previous year after Tess went through her desk drawers looking for a pen and rearranged Mia's things. Mia had asked me for a lock. I'd said, isn't that a bit much? Sandra had said, locks in the house send the wrong message. But Mia pushed and I relented and installed a basic knob lock. The kind you can pop open with a flathead screwdriver. Which is exactly what Tess did. I was at work. Sandra was at home. According to what Tess later told her mother, and what Sandra later told me with a level of casualness that made my blood freeze, Tess went into Mia's room because she wanted to borrow a charger. She opened the wooden box on the nightstand. She found the letter. She read it. And then, for reasons that no one in this house has ever been able to adequately explain to me, she tore it up. She tore it into pieces. Not 2 pieces. Not 3. Into confetti. She shredded a dead woman's last letter to her daughter and left the pieces on Mia's bed like it was nothing. When I pressed Tess later, much later, after the explosion, she said, I was just mad. She always acts like she's better than me because of her dead mom. I wanted her to stop acting special. She wanted her to stop acting special. A 12-year-old, then 13, then 14-year-old girl, reading a letter from her dead mother every night, was acting special. And Tess's response to that, her remedy for the perceived inequality of grief, was to destroy the only physical connection her stepsister had to the woman who gave her life. Sandra was home when it happened. She told me later that she heard Tess in Mia's room but didn't check because she was just grabbing a charger. She didn't check. A woman who knew that her daughter had a history of boundary violations with her stepdaughter heard her in the stepdaughter's locked room and didn't walk down the hall. I've thought about that 1,000 times. 1,000 different ways. And the only explanation that makes sense is the one I don't want to accept. Sandra didn't check because she didn't care. Mia's room, Mia's things, Mia's boundaries were never a priority for Sandra because Mia was never a priority for Sandra. Mia was the remnant of a previous life that Sandra had to tolerate, not nurture. And Tess had absorbed that message the way children absorb everything, silently, completely, and then acted on it. Mia came home from school. She went to her room. The door was unlocked. She walked in. She saw the pieces on her bed. I wasn't home yet. Sandra told me that she heard a sound from Mia's room that she described as screaming, but not like a tantrum. More like something breaking. Sandra went to check. She found Mia on the floor, picking up the pieces, trying to fit them together, hands shaking, Tears streaming, whispering, "No, no, 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 no," Sandra said. She stood in the doorway and watched for a moment before asking what happened. Mia looked up and said, "Tess did this," Sandra said. "I'm sure it was an accident." An accident? Tearing a 4-page letter into dozens of pieces is not an accident. Unlocking a door with a screwdriver is not an accident. Reading someone's most personal possession and choosing to destroy it is not an accident. But Sandra said accident because that was the word that protected Tess, and protecting Tess was what Sandra did, the same way I protected the peace. Mia called me at work. She was sobbing so hard I could barely understand her. She said, "Daddy," she ripped up Mom's letter. She ripped it up. All of it. I felt something crack behind my sternum. I said, "I'm coming home." I left work. I drove home. I walked through the door. Mia was in her room with the pieces spread on her bed, trying to tape them together. Some pieces were too small. Some had been crumpled. The handwriting was torn through words, through sentences, through her mother's name at the bottom. Catherine's signature, the last thing her hand ever wrote, was ripped in half. Mia was holding the two halves together, pressing them flat, trying to make them whole. She looked up at me with the most broken face I've ever seen on a living person and she said, "Daddy, please fix it." I should have held her. I should have sat on that floor and held my daughter and told her I was going to make this right. I should have walked down the hall, found Tess, and delivered consequences so swift and so severe that the message was unmistakable. You do not touch my daughter's things. You do not enter her room. You do not go near the memory of her mother. Ever. That's what I should have done. What I actually did was go to the living room, where Sandra and Tess were sitting on the couch watching television like nothing had happened, and I said, "Tess, did you go into Mia's room?" Tess said, "I just wanted a charger." Sandra said, "She didn't mean to cause any harm." I said, "The letter from Mia's mother is destroyed." Sandra said, "It was an accident, Grant." Tess feels terrible. Tess did not look like she felt terrible. Tess looked like she felt caught. There is a difference. Terrible is remorse. Caught is inconvenience. Tess was inconvenienced. I said, "Tess, that letter was irreplaceable. Mia's mother wrote it before she died." Tess said, "I said I was sorry." She hadn't said she was sorry. Not to Mia. Not to me. She said I was sorry the way people say it when they want the conversation to end, not when they mean it. Sandra put her arm around Tess and said, "She's a kid, Grant. Kids do stupid things. Let's not blow this out of proportion. Let's not blow this out of proportion." A dead woman's last letter to her daughter was in pieces on a bed and my wife was telling me not to blow it out of proportion. And I, Grant, the father, the protector, the man who held Catherine's hand while she died and promised to take care of our daughter, looked at my wife, and I nodded. I nodded. I went back to Mia's room and I said, "I talked to them. Tess is sorry. Let's try to tape it together." Mia looked at me. She looked at me the way a person looks at a building they've just watched collapse. She said, "That's it? She destroyed Mom's letter and that's it?" I said, "What do you want me to do?" She said, "I want you to act like my dad. I want you to act like my dad." 6 words from a 16-year-old girl that told me, in the clearest possible terms, that I had stopped being her father a long time ago. That I had become the man who keeps the peace. The man who nods. The man who says let's not blow this out of proportion because his wife said it first and agreeing is easier than fighting. I had become the man my daughter couldn't count on, and she knew it, and she'd probably known it for years, and this was just the moment she finally said it out loud. But it got worse. Because the letter wasn't the only thing Tess destroyed that month. 2 weeks after the letter incident, Mia's reputation at school collapsed. And Tess was the architect. Mia kept a journal. Digital. On her laptop. She wrote about her mother. She wrote about her grief. She wrote about feeling alone in her own house. She wrote about Tess. She wrote about me. Honest, raw, private entries that were never meant to be seen by anyone. Tess accessed Mia's laptop. I don't know how. Mia believes Tess saw her password over her shoulder. Whatever the method, Tess got in. She screenshot pages of the journal. And she sent them to a group chat of students at their school. The entries Tess selected were surgical. She chose the ones where Mia wrote about feeling unloved. The ones where she wrote about crying herself to sleep. The ones where she wrote about missing her mother so much it felt like a hole in her chest. The ones where she wrote about me. I don't think my dad sees me anymore. I think he sees Sandra and Tess and a life that's easier without my grief in the way. Tess sent these to classmates. Not anonymously. She sent them from her own phone with the caption, Mia's diary. She's so dramatic, lol. Within a day, the entries were circulating. Within 2 days, kids at school were quoting Mia's private grief back to her in the hallways. Within a week, Mia stopped going to school. When I found out, When Mia finally told me through sobs so violent she couldn't stand, I felt the full weight of every failure I'd committed in the last 5 years land on me at once. And still, even then, my first instinct was to mediate. My first instinct was to find a middle ground. My first instinct was to sit everyone down and talk it through, Sandra said. Tess just shared it with a few friends. It got out of hand. She didn't mean for it to go viral. She didn't mean for it. The defense of every person who detonates a bomb and then claims they didn't know it would explode. Mia looked at me during that conversation. The last real look she ever gave me. The look that said, I'm showing you, one final time, exactly what is happening to me in this house. If you choose them again, I am gone. I chose them. Not with words. With silence. With the absence of consequences. With the same nod. The same compliance. The same cowardice that had defined my parenting since the day Sandra moved in. I didn't punish Tess. I didn't demand accountability. I didn't burn the house down the way any father should when his daughter's private grief is weaponized and broadcast to her peers. I sat at a table and I talked it through, and I let Sandra frame it as kids being kids, and I watched my daughter's last thread of hope snap in real time. 4 days later, on a Sunday morning in April, Mia packed one bag. She walked to the door. She looked at me. She said, I'm going to Grandma's. And she left. Catherine's mother, Helen, was 71 when Mia showed up on her doorstep with one bag and a ziploc of torn paper. Helen didn't ask questions. She opened the door. She took the bag. She took my daughter's hand. She led her inside. She made her tea. She let her cry. And then she called me. Helen is a woman who speaks with the precision of someone who has buried a child and has no patience left for nonsense. She said, Grant, Mia is here. She's staying with me. She told me what happened. All of it. Not just the letter. The years. The comments. The stolen clothes. The journal. All of it. I started to explain. She cut me off. I don't want your explanations. I want you to listen. Catherine asked you one thing before she died. One thing. She said, take care of our girl. Those were her words. I was there. I heard them. And you failed. You brought a woman into that house who allowed her daughter to terrorize yours. You watched it happen. You chose the easy path every time. And when Tess destroyed the last thing Catherine left for her daughter, you nodded and walked away. She paused. Then she said, I'm filing for guardianship. Don't fight me on this. I didn't fight her. I didn't fight her because she was right and because I had nothing left to fight with. My moral authority as Mia's father had been emptied out, year by year, silence by silence, until there was nothing inside it except the echo of all the times I should have spoken and didn't. Helen filed. The court reviewed. Mia, at 16, was old enough to express her preference. She told the judge, and I know this because it's in the transcript, I love my dad, but he can't protect me. He chose his wife and her daughter over me every time something happened. I don't feel safe in his house. She said she didn't feel safe. In my house. The house I was supposed to make safe. The house that was supposed to be hers. A judge granted Helen temporary guardianship and I sat in a courtroom and watched my daughter become someone else's responsibility because I had made myself unworthy of the job. Sandra and I had the conversation that night. The one we should have had years ago. I sat at the kitchen table and I said, this is over. She said, what's over? I said, this. Us. The arrangement where your daughter destroys mine and I say nothing. Sandra's face hardened. She said, you're blaming Tess for everything? Mia is difficult. She's been difficult since I moved in. She resents me. She resents Tess. She makes everything about her dead mother. She said dead mother the way someone says old furniture. Like it was clutter. Like it was something taking up space. I looked at my wife and I saw her, really saw her, for the first time in 5 years. Not the woman I married. The woman who had stood in a doorway while my daughter pieced together her mother's torn letter and called it an accident. The woman who had let her daughter broadcast my child's private grief to a school full of teenagers and called it kids being kids. The woman who just said dead mother like it was an inconvenience she'd been tolerating. I said, I want a divorce. Sandra said, you're throwing away our family for a teenager's drama. I said, I'm throwing away our family because I never should have built it on my daughter's back. She left the room. She didn't slam anything. She just left. The way she always left when things got real. Exits without accountability. She taught Tess that too. The divorce took 5 months. Sandra didn't fight for much. She took Tess, her personal belongings, and a financial settlement that was fair by any standard. She didn't fight because fighting would have meant discovery, and discovery would have meant the school records, the journal screenshots, the incident reports, and the guardianship transcript becoming part of the record. Sandra didn't want a paper trail. She wanted a clean exit. The same kind of clean exit she'd been engineering for Tess every time Tess did something cruel, and Sandra covered it up with a smile. Tess. Let me tell you what happened to Tess. Because people will want to know, and the answer is, nothing proportionate. Tess faced school consequences for the journal leak. A suspension. A referral to the school counselor. Her social media accounts were temporarily restricted. The school treated it as cyberbullying, which it was, and Tess completed a behavioral intervention program, which she did with the same performative compliance that bullies learn when they realize the system only requires attendance, not change. She's 16 now. She lives with Sandra. She's in a new school. She's probably fine. She's probably charming new friends and identifying new targets and learning new ways to be casually devastating to people who are softer than she is. Because nobody in her life ever drew a line hard enough to leave a mark. Her mother didn't. And for 5 years, I didn't either. I tried to fix the letter. I took the Ziploc bag of pieces, the one Mia had left behind, and I spent an entire weekend at the kitchen table with tweezers and archival tape and a magnifying glass. I sorted fragments by paper texture. I matched torn edges. I reconstructed what I could. 3 of the 4 pages were recoverable to about 70%. The 4th page, the one with Catherine's closing paragraph and her signature, was beyond repair. Too many pieces. Too small. Too crumpled. The words that ended the letter, Catherine's final words to her daughter, are gone. I don't remember them all. Mia does. Mia has them memorized because she read them every night for 6 years. But the paper, Catherine's actual handwriting, the physical proof that her hand existed and moved across a page for her daughter, that's gone. I placed the reconstructed pages in an acid-free sleeve. I put them in a box. I haven't given them to Mia because Mia won't see me. The box sits on my desk, next to a photo of Catherine holding Mia as a baby. Some nights I open it and I look at the handwriting and I trace the letters the way Mia used to trace them, and I think, I was supposed to protect this. This was the one thing I was never supposed to let anyone touch. And I let a teenager with a screwdriver and a grudge walk into my daughter's room and shred it while I was at work and my wife was on the couch watching television. Mia is 17 now. She lives with Helen. She goes to a new school. She's doing well, according to Helen, who gives me brief, factual updates every few weeks. Not because Mia asks her to. Because Helen believes a father, even a failing one, should know his daughter is alive and healthy. Mia doesn't know Helen updates me. If she did, she'd probably ask her to stop. Mia's grades are good. She has friends. She's in an art class. She's drawing again. Helen told me she's been doing charcoal portraits. Helen didn't say it to make me feel better. She said it because it's true and because Helen doesn't edit reality for anyone's comfort, which is exactly the quality my daughter needed in a guardian and the quality I lacked as a father. Mia doesn't call. Doesn't text. Doesn't respond to emails. I wrote her a letter. Handwritten. The irony of writing a letter to a girl whose letter was destroyed is not lost on me. I told her I was sorry. I told her I failed her. I told her I should have protected her and I didn't. I told her I chose comfort over courage and she paid the price. I told her that her mother would be ashamed of me. That last line was the hardest to write because it's the truest thing in the letter. Catherine would be ashamed. She married a man she believed would protect their daughter, and that man dissolved the moment protection required confrontation. Helen told me Mia received the letter. She didn't say whether Mia read it. I don't ask. I live alone now. The house where we all lived is sold. I'm in a smaller place. 2 bedrooms. One of them is set up for Mia. A bed. A desk. A lamp. A nightstand with space for a wooden box. The room is untouched. Clean sheets. Empty walls. Waiting. I know she may never come. I know that room may sit empty for years, for decades, for the rest of my life. But I keep it ready because it's the only way I know how to say, without words, without a letter she might not read, without a phone call she won't answer, there is a place for you here. There will always be a place for you here. Even though I spent 5 years making you feel like there wasn't. People ask me what I'd do differently. The question makes me want to break something because the answer is so obvious it's almost insulting. Everything. I'd do everything differently. I'd set boundaries the first time Tess took me as close. I'd shut down the first cruel comment at the dinner table. I'd tell Sandra, clearly and without apology, my daughter is not the shock absorber for your daughter's behavior. I'd put a real lock on Mia's door and dare anyone to question it. I'd hold the letter in my own hands if I had to, keep it in a safe, vault it like the irreplaceable artifact it was. I'd choose my daughter. Every time. Without hesitation. Without negotiation. Without a single glance at Sandra's disapproving face. But I didn't. I chose the peace. I chose the path where nobody raised their voice and everybody pretended the house was happy and one child absorbed all the damage so the other three could be comfortable. I chose that path every day for 5 years, and at the end of it, my daughter walked out with one bag and a Ziploc of torn paper, and the peace I'd protected so carefully collapsed the moment the door clicked shut. The peace was never real. It was just Mia being quiet. And I mistook her silence for consent when it was actually surrender. I'm 46 years old. I have a job. I have an apartment. I have a room that's waiting for a daughter who may never walk into it. I have 3 reconstructed pages of a letter written by a woman who trusted me to take care of our child. I have the knowledge that Catherine's last paragraph, her final words, the ones that Mia memorized and whispered to herself every night before sleep, are gone from the physical world forever because I married a woman whose daughter saw grief as competition, and I did nothing about it until it was too late. There is no redemption in this story. Not yet. Maybe not ever. Mia owes me nothing. Not forgiveness. Not a phone call. Not a chance. She owes me exactly what I gave her for 5 years, nothing. And if she decides, at 17 or 25 or 40, that the door is open again, I'll be here. In this apartment. With her room ready. With the reconstructed letter in its acid-free sleeve. With everything I should have said sitting in my chest like a stone I can't put down and don't want to. Catherine, if there's anything left of you somewhere, anywhere, I need you to know, I'm sorry. I broke the one promise that mattered. I let them hurt her. I let them take the last thing you left her. And the man you married, the man you trusted, the man who held your hand and said I'll take care of her, he disappeared inside his own cowardice, and by the time he came back, your daughter was gone. She's safe. She's with your mother. She's drawing again. But she's not with me. And I don't know if she ever will be. And the letter. Your letter. The one you wrote in a hospital bed with shaking hands 3 days before you left us. The one that said I'm proud of you. The one she read every night like a prayer. The one that ended with words I can't remember because I never memorized them the way she did because I thought it would always be there. It's in pieces, Catherine. And so am I.